All right. Hello, everyone. I believe we are live. If you can hear me, just please let me know in the chat. Just want to make sure that we are good. All righty. All right. I think we can go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PM Therapy live session, and I'm really excited to get the show started. With me is the very notable Hussain B. Really excited to have you on the show, Hussain. By the way, did you know that you have the same name with my brother, Hussain? I don't think I
I
ever
did
told you.
not know that.
I don't think
No,
I ever told you that.
no,
Yeah.
but
So
that's good to know. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be here.
yeah. No, welcome to the show, Hussein. Yeah, I think a lot of people watching this know about your work. You are the PMO guy, the PMO guru. But I will let you introduce yourself, Hussein, for those people that don't know you. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
For sure. Thanks again, Mukhtar. And so I'm Hussain bin PMOpreneur and CEO at Provaz Consulting. I help companies become better at managing projects, and that really comes in three ways. There's the consulting piece, there's the coaching piece, and then there's the training piece. The consulting piece really involves, um, doing assessments. Whether organizations need a PMO or not, whether if they do need a PMO, what should the roadmap look like? Help them implement that. Identifying process, people, tools that can be incorporated, help them find and implement and adopt the right tools, etc. As well. So that really helps when if you're looking to see whether you really need a PMO or whether you need to set one up or resurrect one or optimize one or even rebrand one. So that's really the consulting piece. The coaching piece is really where aspiring PMO leaders as well as current PMO leaders want to know either how to get the role and once they've gotten the role, how to knock it out of the park, right? Essentially, all the things that I talked to you about, what I do in the consulting piece, that is what they want to do themselves, and so I provide the necessary coaching for that. And then training, of course, is working with organizations leader to deliver custom project management trainings and workshops to upskill and optimize their teams. In
Okay.
addition to that, I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor. In fact, the first one on the topic of PMOs, I have 3 courses there: setting up a PMO, um, how to successfully lead a PMO, and thriving as a project manager in the age of AI. And about 160,000 people have benefited from my courses there. I've worked with individuals, I've worked with SMBs, Fortune 500 companies, non for profits, and I've worked in organizations across 15 plus industries in North America and outside. I've also been featured by industry entities like Gartner and Capterra in their articles as well as PM software buying guides.
Nice. Thank you for that very nice and succinct um, introduction. So, and this is, I think you're the right person for this topic, right? We're going to be talking about PMOs, PMs, and startups, right? So before we get into the meat of this conversation, what's one thing that people might not know about you from reading your LinkedIn profile?
Hmm. I am a big aviation buff,
Okay.
so I enjoy flying a lot. I wanted to be a pilot. Actually, that was my um, dream profession. I'm very much far away from it, but what I do is I just enjoy flying. I don't have a pilot's license at all, but I mean flying and as a passenger and enjoy. A lot of people get anxious and stressed and sort of go away from it. I enjoy it. A lot of people are like, well, we have 1 stops or 2 stops. I enjoy that because it's more landings and more takeoffs to experience. So yeah, that's I guess one thing that people may not know about me.
Yeah.
But those who what is interesting though is one thing that I've tried to connect that with what I do is that I'm originally also from Pakistan, and so the national language there is Urdu. which is a combination of various languages, including Arabic and Persian. But the word Parvaz, which is the name of my company, Parvaz Consulting, actually
Mhm.
means flying or
Okay.
flight. And so
Nice.
that's one thing that I've done to sort of tie in my
Yeah.
dream dream profession to
To-
what I do today. I
Nice.
do enjoy what I do today, but that's definitely one thing that many probably won't be able to figure out from a LinkedIn profile.
Nice. Nice. I mean, there's still time. You never know. You might get your license and fly. Right? There's still time. By the way, similar. Like when I was young, that was what I wanted to be, because my yeah, that was like, and I was very serious about it up until even college, right? Where I wanted to read, I wanted to read aeronautic engineering, and then 9/11 happened. and so yeah, that was going to be difficult, and I wanted to also be a pilot, actually. So was it a pilot or aeronautic engineering? But then 9/11 happened, and then no, that was not gonna be easy. Yeah, and then I went on to do other things. But yeah, I had the same thing. Like I wanted to be a pilot till today. Like when I see, like when I'm close to the airport, when I see planes, like I still marvel, at the sight, and yeah. But anyway, yeah, interesting that we have that in common. By the way,
Yeah,
the reason I'm mentioning this is like because Hussein and I, we've met before, right? So we're friends, but like we're just getting to know some new things about each other. Like he didn't know that my brother was also called Hussein, so that's quite interesting. All right, so let's start moving into the conversation proper. How did you get into project management and program management in the first place?
well, right after college, I got into my first job so I have a background in computer science. That was what my bachelor's was in. My first job was as a consultant in a systems integration firm. It was a small company, and with small companies, you have to wear multiple hats. And since it was a consulting firm, there was certainly a project management hat associated with it. And so
Hmm.
essentially, to sort of say it succinctly, I got thrown in the deep end
Hmm.
uh, and learned along the way, right? And so, from a small consulting company to a large consulting company to a mid-sized consulting company to another large consulting company. So through, my career really has progressed over four different consulting companies when I wasn't doing this for myself. And then I also had, independent contracting and other experiences in project management, PMO leadership, and program management. But essentially, that is how I got into the mix. So I went in as a developer. I came out, into project management.
It sounds like you went through the ringer. It's like you went in, with having, one thing in mind, and you came out the other end
Yeah.
differently. Nice. So, all right. From consulting, you got into project management, program management. How did you get into PMOs? Like, helping people build PMOs, scale PMOs, train on PMOs. Like, how did you get into that?
Yeah, so as part of that whole cycle that I just talked about, PMO was in the mix as well. So
Okay.
I was included in the you know uh, when the PMO was there, just part of, as a PM was part of that. Helped seeing the PMO getting built out, and then ultimately advised and helped organizations to set up their PMOs, right? So that's really the flavor where I got it, and then ultimately, I mean, I think this was back in 2014. I thought to myself, well, you know what? I want to go ahead and just give back to the community, and I just want to produce something and just give it. And so I decided to come up with this slide deck called "The Ultimate Guide to Setting Up a PMO." The 13 slide deck, which I posted on SlideShare. And one thing that I did was very, very consciously, I wanted to do it in a way where I didn't have to, where I referenced nothing, right? So it was just my experience, and that's about it. And so, thought about it. Well, what would the PMO look like? What could it look like? How could it be set up? What could it be done? What are the different components of it, etc. And I built that deck and I put it on SlideShare. I don't know if you know about that platform, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I think it still exists, but it was very popular at that point in time. And then, a lot of people downloaded it beyond my expectations. People took like snapshots of it. People reached out to ask questions, and that sort of indicated that maybe I was onto something there. And
Mm.
essentially, that is how Parvaz Consulting really, really started. And everything that I do, whether it's creating courses, LinkedIn Learning, creating my own courses, otherwise doing webinars, all my consulting engagements around PMOs, they all essentially stem from there. So that's how really the journey has been for me.
Okay. So you said this was in 2014, right?
Yes.
Okay. So by that time, have you like what was your experience like when you decided, okay, I'm just gonna put my knowledge into this 13 slide deck and just throw it out there? Like what have you done by then?
So I had a lot of experience in project management, a lot of experience in program management, some experience in portfolio management, and
Mhm.
some experience in PMO leadership and PMO advisory,
Hmm.
right? So I had a mix of all of that, and when you sort of start something, there is a bit of sort of, I would say, a balance of naivety
Hmm.
and optimism.
Yeah.
Optimism that, hey, I will be able to contribute something, and naive that, well, maybe even with this much experience I could be able to, make an impact. But one thing that I did want to do is I wanted to make sure that was original,
Yeah.
right? It was something which I could say, yes, this is my own, right? And that's why I was very, very particular not to reference anything, because then I knew that I'd be sort of influenced by this. So the only thing I really relied on was just experience.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. And I think that that's really amazing because there's so many ways to do things, and there's your perspective is going to be unique, and you sort of honed things over time, right? It's almost like this is if somebody were to call you to come help them consult, like this might just be like your reference guide or your cheat sheet, so to speak, right? And the reason I was asking that question is I think you know all any PM can do that right now. Any PMO leader can do something like that. Like you have something that you've done over and over again, and you just sort of compress all that knowledge into this succinct document and put it out there. I think that you never know what can come from it. At the very least, I think that it is proof for your next employer of what you can do, right? So
exactly.
I just think that that's actually very, very interesting, and a good thing to do, now, especially in a very competitive market.
Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And, like a lot of people do reach out when they are interviewing for a PMO leadership role, or if they're not able to find one, and, asking about strategies and tactics to be able to do that. Um, and so my main goal there is to really teach them, if you had an interview today and you were asked, well, I'm going to go ahead and give you the job tomorrow. What are your first 90 days going to look like? What are your first 100 days going to look like?
Hmm.
That is what you need to do to show and prove in a systematic, methodical manner that will help you nail it and set you apart from everyone else,
Yeah.
right? So that's really the fundamental piece. So to your point, yes, everybody can do that, and I think in addition to the resume, that can be the real proof of, well, this person really knows what they're talking about,
Yeah.
and they've done this before, and if I can understand this in a minute, I think this person is the right person for us to lead us through the way. So I think encouraging people to be able to come up with their own perspectives, uh, you know, and again crafting them from their experiences, right, can be extremely, extremely valuable. Like for instance, and one would say, well, we have a lot of guides out there. We have, a lot of decks, a lot of info. Everybody can be able to do that. But the
Mm.
reality is that, when they're hiring you, they're looking at you for the expertise,
Yeah.
right? They don't care where you got it from as long as it's right for the company and
Yeah.
can really stick. And so with that said, you've got to do it in a way which is convincing for them to make sure that they think that it's realistic and practical for that to work, right? And so I think that is really where rubber meets the road. And also, it can also, your unique perspectives can really set you apart. What I mean by that is, I've seen and worked with so many different types of companies, so many different types of PMO leaders, so many opportunities out there, and they're all asking for something slightly different every now and then,
Mm.
right? Now, some may have certain types of project experience, certain type of a PMO situation, or certain type of a mix of those, or a permutation combination of that. And having that in place can really make a world of a difference. So, for instance, I had a a a, a client who was a senior PM, and um, she didn't get a chance really to really set up the PMO within her organization. And she knew she won't be able to, even though she knows how to do it, she's seen it, uh, and just because of the structure in her current organization, it just really wasn't going to be possible. So she was looking outside, and ultimately she got a role as from a senior PM to a PMO leader for a global HR department within the company, just because she had a lot of M&A experience, which was needed for their organization, and a lot of HR project management experience, and of course, a mix of PMO setup experience. And so combining that gave her that unique vantage point that set her apart for everyone else. So, and that was a massive, massive shift for her. So, I definitely echo your point about, having your unique perspectives and then sharing it with the world. And, like you and I do today in the world of LinkedIn, just portraying it. So you may not even necessarily need to go ahead and create a deck.
Mm.
You can just show up and you know post something regularly to share your perspectives and exchange ideas with everyone out there.
For sure. No, definitely. And that repetition, that's what builds credibility, right? Just doing it consistently.
Yeah,
Um, and my recommendation is to just start at a manageable pace, even if it's once in 2 weeks, right? But
yeah,
you just consistently showing up like that, that's really what builds that brand and that your credibility. Um, I just want to go back a bit to what you mentioned about that 90-day plan. Um, one of my clients, so he had gone to do the PMP, and he thought that that's what he needed. Like, I'm just going to go do the PMP, and now, the jobs will start flowing in. And he was struggling. So he came to me for help, and we worked on like the strategy, positioning and all of that. And during the interview, one of the things that he did was that he did this, what we call a proposal presentation, right? In there, it's like, it's a very succinct presentation. Why me? Why the company? My 30, 60, 90-day plan. He said that was like that 30, 60, 90-day plan was the reason why they hired him. And this was with a Fortune 50 company, right? So just goes back to that point that, just because it gets to a point where all resumes look the same. Like ChatGPT is polishing everybody's resume. Yeah, everybody's boosting efficiency and all of that on their resume. But the like, what are you going to do for me? And show that you've given it thought. Like you understand the job description, you understand their pain points, and okay, this is what I can do. And even with that, like ChatGPT can help you. Like you can work with ChatGPT, but I think going the extra mile is needed in this very, very competitive market. Yeah, but he gave me that feedback recently. Like that was the reason why he got hired. So I think just to echo what you said, and you really need to go above and beyond and show what you can do for them.
absolutely.
Yeah. Um. So let's switch gears a bit. So I want to hear about one very important lesson you've learned the hard way. And I know I'm going to put you on the spot a bit, so I'm going to put myself on the spot first, right? So for me, I'll go first. One of the lessons that I learned the hardest way was, a while ago I was put on this project. This was a very critical project for my company, and I think I was weighing above my head, right? But if this project was very risky, if it succeeded, it was going to pay off big time. If it didn't succeed, then I was easily gonna be canned and let go, right? So I was sort of in that spot, like, I was also in consulting, I was on the bench, and it was almost like, okay, this person is not doing anything, so let's just put this person on this very risky project. So they put me on this risky project, and then I met with this, what they call the contract holder. So this person basically signs the checks, right? And I thought, okay, this is my person. I need to make him happy. And then I chatted with him and was like, okay, these are the people that you need to meet. All right, let's get things going. This is the plan. And I did that. And then I met with a few people, and then I met with somebody else. And this meeting just went sideways. Like, this person was so upset. Like, who told you to go about the project this way? How come I wasn't consulted? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I found out that this woman was actually the main person that I should be making happy on the project, right? So it's like I started off on the wrong foot, and everything was gonna be. It's like I almost jeopardized everything. Like my company was gonna, maybe even get me fired. But eventually, I ended up like making it up to her, like really doing one-on-ones, ensuring that things were going as she wanted it. She ended up becoming an ally, a champion, and even a mentor later on. And the project was so successful. But long story short, what I really learned from there is forget the org charts. I mean, the org charts are helpful, but you need to really listen and really observe dynamics, right? And then proceed, carefully. So that's one lesson that I've learned. Like, I don't just necessarily rely on org charts. I read, not necessarily read the room, read the org, right? Because power lies in interesting places, right? So that's my lesson. Hussain, what's a lesson that you've learned the hard way?
The lesson that I learned was actually was that that you've got to be a squeaky wheel, right? And what does that really mean? Is that you've got to make the noise when it really matters. And this was a time where I learned this from my manager, who again, we're in a consulting organization. I was working for a client, and some high visibility projects really weren't getting the attention that they should, right? Like, people were getting swapped from projects, and I was asking for decisions to be made, and nobody was really listening in because they were going for other priorities and all of that. And ultimately it started impacting my project, right? And for no fault of my own. I mean, to the point there where I wasn't vocal enough. And so she sort of grabbed me by the rein and said, "Hey, Hussain, you know what? You've got to be a squeaky wheel." I'm like, what do you mean by that? Isn't that a bad thing? She's like, no, when you need when you need attention, you need to go ask for it, right? You need to let people know, if you don't do this by this is what happens, and it's not on me, it's on you. I'm trying a lot of these different things. I'm not getting the attention that I need. I need you to listen to me, right? And so, I think in today's day and age where, yes, we talk about loudest noises winning, and yes, we do talk about, sort of, the workplace culture, introvert, bullying, etc., etc. Those are all ground realities. But as a person, for me, I don't necessarily just go and be out there, right? I usually talk when asked upon, or provide advice, etc., accordingly. And so in the game of project management, when you need attention, the biggest cheerleader for your project is you as a project leader, or your program, right? And so in that case, if not you, then who? And so it's really, being a squeaky wheel really isn't like being a an empty vessel that's making the noise, but rather taking a call for you to really stand up,
Yeah.
right, and take action. And that's how I've seen it, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, the biggest lesson really has been is to be the squeaky wheel, and that's something that I see all the time, right? Where let's say, for instance, PMO leaders are asked to set up a PMO, but they're getting dragged into 40 other things. And those 40 other things, some of them may be related to the PMO setup, some of them not. And so, they've got to go ahead and set expectations and reel things back in. Or, even, struggling, PMs where, they've got everything nice on the deck, etc., but they're not just being able to step up and grab attention. And so that is really where things really need to be in place. So if you think you're doing it for the right and you have rational data behind it and you've tried every other way, you've got to be the squeaky wheel.
Yeah, no, that's such an important point. And, you know, so there are different PM personalities out there. There are people that that comes naturally to them, just being the squeaky wheel. But I think there are also many PMs that are more on the reserved side.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to sort of learn how to do that, right? Because at the end of the day, you are responsible for the project, and if it doesn't succeed, it's going to come back to bite you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's really important. One thing that came to mind when you were speaking, like one thing that I used to do is basically, I guess we can get more concrete, because what will happen is week after week is the same status, or is the same status because I don't know, somebody else has been pulled into a high priority project, but mine is still priority. My project is, oh yeah, this is a strategic initiative, this is the top 3, but then the person that I need is working on another high priority. I usually just say, okay, I'm going to put this project on hold. And then when I say something like that, then it just forces, okay, no, don't put it on hold. Let's find it, let's work something out. Because I think everybody just has to be realistic with each other. Like, it's simple. It's like, okay, if I don't have the person, let's just put it on hold and let's not pretend, because that's what happens. Like, people are pretending like things are moving on,
right?
But it's not, right? So, and it's your job as a leader to just call it out. Like, this is what's happening, and this is what we need, and I'm more than happy to have the conversation on what we can do. But if we don't have the resources, if we don't, then there's nothing that we can do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And by the way, if you have questions, leave them in the chat and we'll get to them. Hi, I see Carrie is leaving some comments. Hi, Carrie. But yeah, we'll get to them. So please just put your questions in the chat. So let's pivot a bit, Hussain. Let's talk about PM leadership. So you've coached a lot of PMs, PM leaders, PMO leaders. If somebody is a senior PM, for example, and they want to go to that next level, they want to go into leading PMs or leading a PMO, what would you advise them to do? Like, imagine maybe I'm your client. I come to you, I'm a senior PM. What would your advice to me be?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's a great question, rather. For a senior PM or anyone who wants to ultimately step up to the next role, you've got to live it, show that you've done it, demonstrate that, and be able to then elevate yourself to it, right? And so in smaller companies, I think it's much more easier, where let's say you do see, you may have an organization where you have a bunch of PMs and senior PMs, but you don't really have a PMO, and you have a senior PM who's interested in ultimately setting up the PMO. They could come up with that 30, 60, 90-day plan, for instance, and pitch it to their leadership. Or, they could take on a few different entities from or other responsibilities of what a PMO leader would do, and start working upon them or becoming, learning more about them. They're, because being a PM and a senior PM is very different than being a PMO leader, right? Here, you're managing a project or a program, um, and ultimately, everybody's indirectly reporting into you. um, Whereas with a PMO, sure, it's about projects, programs, portfolio, essentially creating a brand new function or an entity within the organization, right? And so you need to think about performance management, people management from that perspective, mentoring, coaching, and in a lot of ways PMs do that, but you've sort of got to go ahead and be more focused towards that. You know, the softer skills about working vertically across different entities, different departments. Making sure that you are being the champion and an evangelist of the entity. That really matters. So learning those assets and learning those attributes can be phenomenally helpful for those senior PMs. Now, if you have a senior PM who is in a mid-sized or large organization where, let's say, you do have a PMO leader, um, in that case, it's a fantastic opportunity for you to learn from that PMO leader, and maybe find approach, if you have a good relationship, sort of ask them to take them under your wing, and also contribute to a few things, take some things off their plate so that you can learn a bit more about it. Let's say if it's assessing a new tool or driving more adoption or refining the portfolio management process, or making tweaks to the intake, or sprucing up the reporting. So many things that you could do to really help out functionally to standardize, optimize, and take things to next level for the standards of project management, governance, execution, and then obviously the strategy associated with it, right? So quite a few things there. Maybe you could take one total arm, for instance, resource management, and just be the resource manager, sort of lead that along the way. So and then once you have that in play, then you can start looking outside to
Mm.
see, and for first time PMO leaders, I generally recommend them to look at smaller to mid-sized companies, because sure, the pay may be a lateral pay, but that's the risk that you're taking to get that first job, and they're taking the risk to by bringing a first time PMO leader,
Mm.
right? And so definitely a lot of opportunities there, a lot of ways to sort of think about it, but this in general is a blueprint
Yeah.
that people can follow.
Nice. So it's really about doing the role before you actually get to role. So you need to sort of prove yourself at, wherever you are, right? You could be, like you mentioned, for a mid-sized company. Like, first of all, what can you take off from your leader's plate? Are there things that you can, is there an assignment that you can take on, and then sort of prove yourself? And then the other thing that you mentioned, I'm just trying to summarize. The other thing that you mentioned is, you know, it could be a strategic move to go to a company that might be smaller in size, and the move might be lateral when it comes to the compensation, when it comes to salary, but it's a risk that can help propel you to the next stage of your career. Did I get that right, or did I miss?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And the reason why I say that is there's this concept that I've sort of come up with called um, the PMO chasm, right? Where the jump from a coordinator to project manager, program manager to and portfolio manager is sort of a curve,
Yeah.
but then there's a chasm, and you've got to cross it to become a PMO leader,
Hmm.
right? Because these are natural transitional points from
Yeah.
a career, and yes, even the PMO leader is for many who aspire to be that, but those are still the scale is changing from project to program to portfolio. But then you're now looking at a completely different role where you're becoming the leader of an entity, a department, a
Hmm.
function. And so that is a jump that you have to take. And so you need to be ready for that and be prepared so that you can go ahead and, with your preparedness, can sort of think of your preparedness as the bridge that can help you cross that chasm. And
What? Sorry, Hussein.
go ahead. No, no, go ahead.
No, but what makes the role so different? Like, because people are thinking, like, I mean, I went from project coordinator to project manager to program manager, senior program, maybe even staff program manager, and I've been my scope has been increasing. I've been leading teams. I mean, even in some of my teams, there have been executives that have been in my teams, right? So I can lead, but what why is that chasm there? Like, what makes a PMO leadership position different?
Think of it this way. If you're in IT and you're a software developer, you become a software developer to a senior software developer. Maybe you become a network engineer. Maybe you get into infrastructure. Maybe you get into cloud enterprise architecture. But then, do you become the VP of IT?
Hmm.
Right? Do you become the director of IT? There is that chasm
Yeah.
that is always there, where as a leader of a project or a program, yes, you're a people leader, but here you are the people leader. You have an accountability to ensure all those things go well, but you're not responsible. Your team is responsible for that. And so, in order to be able uh, to form the entity, to rally everyone behind it, to
Hmm.
rally everyone around it, because in some cases you may have to sell the concept of PMO. In some cases you may be placed to set up the PMO, but people don't really know what it is because they've just seen somebody else do it and they're like, well, it's
Yeah.
working for them, maybe we should work for us. So being able to rally people around it, being able to make sure that you're focusing uh, on the key elements so that it sticks. So from an organizational change management,
Yeah.
setting expectations by not doing things that just don't work or that are fancy but will actually make things work right now. That is a lot of the elements that separates the two, where you have that chasm,
Yeah.
right? So that is the way that I would really think about it.
Okay, that makes sense. And you probably have maybe P&L responsibility, and you're working against you're really working against like some very powerful forces, right? Because in a lot of places, the PMO is the environment is not set up for a PMO to exist. Like a lot of people wanna like kill PMOs, right? So
Yeah,
so you're yeah. I think in order for you to first of all build a PMO, and not just any PMO, like a PMO that would survive a lot of the skepticism and the scrutiny, and not only that, to also thrive as well, right? So I
yeah.
think that it really takes it's really gonna test you, right? And I'm just thinking back to even your banner where it says something like, I don't remember the percentage of PMO fails that you help them defy the odds, right? So that's coming to me right now. What's the percentage again of PMOs that fail?
It's 50%. I think it is an old stat. I, but I would say the percent really is not as important. I think what is important is that there are there are a lot of success stories, but the probability for something not working out well and the lot of PMOs is more, for a lot of reasons. You know, one being, like you said, that people just generally don't want, for some reason, are, well, not for some reason, there are a lot of reasons why it has a bad rep, so people don't want it, right? There's a piece about people don't know what they want, right? There is a thing that where there's a piece where people really think it should be, that it's a magic wand and it should do everything, right? And so if you come in and step into that role, you've really got to do a great job in sort of managing expectations around the board
Yeah.
and creating that 30, 90, 30, 60, 90, 100 days roadmap, in a way where it works. And so the approach that I use, etc., what you see, in that deck that I created in my LinkedIn learning courses, in my consulting work, in my coaching, all helps you through of what you really need to do to build a formidable uh, roadmap to really make sure that you have a PMO that will succeed. So essentially, in a project where you have to create a formidable roadmap, which is a formidable schedule or and a plan,
Yeah.
you need to go ahead and create that. So think of the setup PMO setup as a project in itself, right? That needs to be executed while you're doing many other things. You may be asked to go ahead and run other projects. You may be asked to go ahead and hire more people. Sure, that's part of the PMO setup, no problem. You may be asked to uh, you know look at things just because you're good at something, right? And I have seen that distraction happen so many times. I remember that I had a client who was like saying, you know what, I've been hired and now I'm just like on the PMO setup. I'm so happy. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm just waiting for the day when he's going to come and say, well, you know what, I've been put on this as well. Yep. And within 2 weeks, like, yeah, Hussein, you know what? I'm still on the PMO, but they're like asking me to come and take a look at this project that needs to be rescued. And I was like, yep, that's where it starts. That's how it starts, right? So, but the reality is you can do a PMO setup in about, I would say if you can dedicate 15 to 20% of your time on the actual PMO setup, is very, very practical for you to be able to do something within 90 to 100 days. Now, of course, the scale, depth, sphere of influence of every PMO matters. But then what I tell people is that the scope of your PMO that you define should ultimately make sure that it fits within this timeline parameter, right? So generally, it takes around. It would. I've seen. I tell people for the first 90 days at your role, the bare minimum you've got to do is be able to have that roadmap that we talked about,
Hmm.
and also address a few quick wins, and then whether that roadmap is the top 5 things, top 10 things, a mix between high and medium prioritized recommendations, can take you to another 90 to 180 days. But
Hmm.
within the first 90 days you've got to go ahead and lock that roadmap in. If you haven't, then you're not really doing justice to the role that you are, and you are getting swayed away
Yeah.
by everything around you. And so that is the expectation that ultimately you need to set.
Yeah. No, that's. I think you said a lot of really good things. Um, for those of you that are watching, we are. I knew that we were probably going to go over, so I asked Hussein if it was okay. So yeah, so we're still going to keep on going because I think the conversation is really amazing, and there's still a lot that we have to dig into. But if you have to drop off, that's fine. The recording will be there. But yeah, just wanted to let you know. So if you have questions, still please put them in the chat. We'll get to them later on. So let's get into the state of PMO of the PMO. So what are your thoughts? Is the PMO, is it rising? Is it shrinking? Is it evolving? Because sometimes you hear, oh, the PMO is dead. Other times you hear, oh, you hear a lot of good things about the PMO. So from your perspective, like, what is the state of the PMO right now? No pressure.
I think the PMO is definitely rising and evolving.
Okay.
I do not think the PMO is dead by any means. And it could be called something at different organizations, but ultimately that is a flavor of the PMO, right? So I've heard of IMO, Integration Management Office, Transformation Management Office, which is TMO, uh, uh, Virtual Management Office, Value Management Office, Strategic Management Office. These are all then you also have the Program Management Office, and then of course you have the PMO, which is the Project Management Office. But all of these um, are different flavors of the same thing. And where it really matters is the scope of work, the sphere of influence, and who it really needs to impact. And that comes by design, because the need of the organization has evolved to that point, right? So for instance, if you're in an organization and you don't have a baseline PMO, you don't have projects that are, you don't have standards, you don't have governance, you don't have proper execution, you don't have any portfolio management strategy tied to it, and then you're like, well, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and set up a value management office. Well, how would you propose doing that?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you need to have all of those things in place where you're at least, if not walking, crawling, and then ultimately then get throw a layer on top of that. So I do think that the needs of of organizations have evolved, and with that, these various flavors of PMOs have come along, which
Mm.
I think is a great thing, because it does indicate that the the function is responding to business needs, which is essentially which every function must do. So I do think it's a great thing, and I think that people are people who've got it are responding well to it. I think what this does do is that it sort of you know creates a bit of a shiny object syndrome as well,
Mm.
where people are like, well, I think I want that, but they don't really know what that is, or they think that it's step 4 and they're still on step 2,
Yeah.
right? So that's one thing. The other thing is that it's also creating a lot of confusion around it, where, well, do I really need this, or do I need this? Why can't I have all of them,
Mm.
right? So I think with the different choices, that's what the situation is. In many organizations, they rebrand the PMO to a uh, totally different name, which is fine too. But those who've been with PMOs can really recognize, okay, that's really a PMO, and they've called it this. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they're like, you know what, Sam, I've started uh, a new job right now, and you know, it's called something else. It looks like a PMO. It sounds like a PMO. When I start, I'll find out whether it really is a PMO or not. I was like, okay, well, with everything that you've said to me, it kind of seems like a PMO. So you know what? That's really that's really the situation where we're at, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, many organizations may not even need all flavors of the PMO. So, for instance, in certain cases, we're looking at um, uh, just creating standards, and some organizations would be okay with that. We'll just create standards, and we'll trust everyone else to do them. That's fine. Or in some cases, you may have standards, governance, and execution, but maybe for not all disciplines around the PMO. So maybe you have it for budget management, schedule management, resource management, reporting, but you may not have something for risk and issue management. You may not have something for deliverables management. Again, based on needs of the organization. That there is no, and that's where it goes back to the deck that I talked about, is because that is how I've sort of created it. So now think about it from those components perspective, and I guide clients accordingly as well. Is that you don't necessarily need to do all of it
Yeah.
to really build a formidable PMO. Uh, a formidable PMO is one that will fit for you. So think of your PMO as a Lego set. You've got to have certain basics, but then you can build on it as you go. That is to your liking. That will hit well, right? So that is really how I see the PMO work. Rising and evolving. I'm also seeing it. Yes, I do see that in certain organizations it's not called a PMO, and it may just be a PM function, which is fine, because in that case maybe all they do need is PMs, or they need PMs with following a certain standard, so they'll trust them to do whatever it is, and so that to me works well as well. So yeah.
You mentioned the term formidable PMO. What would you call a formidable PMO? Like, what is that?
So I said formidable PMO roadmap, and what the formidable PMO roadmap is, one that essentially takes an organizational change management into account, and incorporates and involves, engages, educates the right set of stakeholders
Hmm.
to be able to build this. So the way that I do it is it's a step by step process.
Yeah.
Mukhtar, is The first step is you've got to identify the right stakeholders for your PMO. To me, there are three types of stakeholders any PMO has. One is who reports into the PMO, which is your project managers, analysts, coordinators, etc. The second is who works with the PMO, which is your departmental leaders and essentially peers of the PMO leader. And then who does the PMO report into, which is your execs, right? And so the very first step is to make sure that you are identifying the right people from here. And to your point earlier, find people of influence and power within the organization as well, even if they have nothing to do with the PMO, because their say and support is going to make a lot of difference. So identifying those, then you need to find out the right questions that you need to ask to understand what their current project and structural challenges are, right? And not just talk about the symptoms, go down and talk about root causes, right? So for instance, my projects are delayed. Okay, well, why? Why are they delayed? Well, I think that, the PM need to be trained better. Why do you think that? Well, I don't know. Well, what else do you think? Well, I do see that a lot of resources get swapped here and there. But do you think that the PMs are also planning that? Yes, they are planning, but we still don't follow. So when you go to the root cause and not just stick to the symptoms, you can figure out what are the recommendations the PMO can make to fix them. Are there people issues? Are there process issues? Are there tool issues? Is it a combo, right? Is it a buy-in issue? And then based on those recommendations, then you work again with these stakeholders to prioritize them. And then once you prioritize them, you build a schedule around it, and that's your roadmap, right? And so what a lot of PMO who's falter with is, number one, they don't incorporate all the right stakeholders. So for instance, somebody may not even talk to someone saying, well, you know what, I did this PMO setup at this other organization. It's going to work exactly the same way. Boom. No, it doesn't work. Number two, they may just ask the sponsor. So that's their boss, right? Or they may just ask the execs. And that really, creates more of a bridge between the top leadership and your execution team, which is the only reason why you're there. You're there to bridge that gap. And here you're creating a bigger gap, right? So that's something that you've got to really, really avoid. And then I think the art is also to be able to get down to the root causes of those challenges and be able to really get through that. So that, to me, Mukhtar, is the real approach to the formidable roadmap. Just, intro calls, surveys, don't cut it. They just don't cut it because they're very casual, very high level. And many a times you don't do this to really get the information you need. You just really do this so that they can visualize and verbalize the what's in it for me. Because when the time comes for execution of the roadmap, you can go back and tell them, hey, you know what? Remember we talked about this and you said this? Well, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Oh, and remember when we talked about that and you suggested that we should be doing this? Well, guess what? We're going to be putting that in. So they're now invested in the solution because they're a part of it. Like when I do these, like when I do assessments and develop roadmaps for clients, sometimes I have to talk to 30, 35, 40 people. By the 10th conversation, I know exactly what's going on. Does that mean I don't talk to the other 20 or 30? Yes, I do. Because it's not for the information, it's so that they feel good about it. They're invested in it, in the process. And so when it comes time for the actual roadmap, everybody's already bought into it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the effort that you've got to do, put in up front.
Yeah. And it's so tempting to skip all of that because like you want to show results, you want quick wins and all of that. But this foundational work is so key because what makes a lot of I guess PM functions stumble is that you don't have that unanimous buy-in, right? So what I'm hearing from you is like you need to spend that time, invest, get to the root cause, speak to the right people, because also like that act of drilling down deep with them, like a lot of times they've never had those conversations before. So when I've been in those conversations, it's almost like a catharsis. It's like they're going through this, like, oh my god, I feel so much better. I feel so like this is actually what's going on, and like even that, like there's a bond that they form with you then, and then you collate all of this, and it makes sense, and then you all prioritize it together. When it comes time for execution, I think your work is going to be a lot easier, right? Because those people are already bought in initially, right?
That's exactly right. So when you have that time, that one-on-one time with those stakeholders, you're getting down into the nitty-gritty, you're creating that relationship, and then at the same time, you're also really assessing the other person across the table. Is this person truly interested in what I'm doing? Is this person really excited about the PMO? Does this person already have a negative connotation about it, or is this person on the fence? And so with that, you can approach conversations accordingly as well, and involve and engage them and their teams in the prioritization of the roadmap accordingly.
Yeah. No, for sure. That was really meaty. I think we covered a lot, but I want to pivot a bit, and I also want to get to the questions later on. So let's talk about the startup world. So when I look at like a lot of the problems that startups have, it to me it boggles my mind. Like you really need a PM, but a lot of times like that never comes to their mind. Like it takes them a while, like, and a lot of convincing, for them to actually say, okay, we need a PM. And then when they now hire a good PM, it's almost like, oh my goodness, we should have done this a long time ago. Why do you think that is? Like, why is it that? Because I feel like they need the PMs. I don't want to say they need the PMs the most, but they really need the entire need of a PM. But yet, a PM never comes to mind when it comes to the founders, the executives, etc. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so a lot of these tech startups are, creating a product, and so they have product management in there. And so where there's product management, project management is usually never on the radar, or a step cousin, if you will, right? So I do think that the challenge here is not really with startups, but really with product management, where there is, because that exists, people don't think that project management should really be involved. And so for startups to succeed, product and project management should work together like a happy marriage, right? Because there are clear delineations between the two. There's the why and the what that is defined by the product team, and then there's the execution of the how that's led by the project management team. So that is really, really fundamental when it comes to startups, like you said, right? And so where in an entity, or in entities where project management is so distant, no wonder PMO is not even on the radar. It usually isn't. And the closest thing that I've seen to a PMO in these situations has been the role of the chief of staff. Because if there was any non PM related role that I would say is akin to PMO leadership, it is the chief of staff. So for managing the resources, setting the standards, rallying the troops, being able to lead the strategic initiatives, really, that is, and even prioritizing some of them. That's really where the chief of staff's power really lies. And so, in the absence of a PMO, I have seen chief of staffs coming in. Of course, different roles, different spheres of influence. But in the startup world, I think that is how they navigate with the absence of a PMO. It's through the existence of the chief of staff.
Yeah, and even at that, I feel like the startup needs to get to a certain size, because
Yeah.
what I tend to see with chief of staff, they come into it's almost like they're the task force for the CEO, right? Because the CEO doesn't want to have to go through the regular channels. Like, I just need this task force that's going to focus on my priority and just take it all, all the way to, it's like my execution team, right? So that's how I've sort of seen a lot of chief of staffs.
Yeah, and
Operate.
I think it also depends on the size, because for me the PMO is not a function of the revenue of a company, it's a function of the headcount, right? And so when you're like 10, 15 people, you don't really at that point in time are caring about efficiency, you're not caring about productivity, you're not caring about systematic methodical ways. All you're caring about is let's get it done,
Yeah.
right? And so for that, it's really a hardcore let's go 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 do approach, right? Because people are burning the midnight oil.
Yeah.
There is no work-life balance. That's just the nature of the game, and people who are in it have signed up for it,
Yeah.
right? And so it's when after organizations maybe you had 30 or 50 people out in headcount, where just brute forcing your way through it is resulting in you creating more chaos,
Yeah.
resulting in you stepping in your own way or stepping in someone else's way, where there is now opaqueness, not transparency, because now the CEO and execs are now further away from the action,
Yeah.
right? Is when the need for a PMO now needs to come in, because things need to get streamlined, they need to get transparent, they need to be methodical, they need to be systematic, there has to be a set way of doing things upwards, downwards, sideways. And so that is really where the need for the PMO comes in. So for me, it's really a function of the headcount. And by the time you're 70 to 100 people and don't have a PMO within your organization, you really need to take a hard look at it.
Look, Hussein, I've been in companies where it I was the first PM hired at like 600 when they were 600.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like it's gotten to such like it was so painful when it was and
Wow.
even in the company that I was at, like I wasn't even supposed to be hired. It took some convincing. Like somebody came from the outside. I was like, oh my goodness, this is a mess. Like he came from a bigger company, and it's like, let's flip this headcount. Instead of getting the product manager, I want the program manager, right?
Yeah.
And it was almost like, okay, let's see how this goes. And then it ended up working out well. And then it was like, okay, yes, we need a team of, technical program managers and all of that. So, yeah. And I mean, like, even if you think but I've seen if I mention the company's name, like, you would know it's a top tech company. And like, I mean, it is really top. And they just got their first PM. Yeah, like after they were really established, like like a unicorn, right? And then it was almost like, oh my goodness, we actually need a PM. And that person now built out an entire program management function. And, the person has been there, built a team, and, it's been great. But it's only, it goes back to my point. It's like, it takes them, I don't know what it is, but I don't know, maybe it's just, like, it's not like you move from one stage to the other and there's a clear delineation. It's like you're just evolving, right? But it takes some startups a while, like they're really in pain before
Yeah.
they realize that, okay, they need a PM.
Yeah. And I've been a startup co-founder myself. I've been embedded in the startup ecosystem for a bit. I've actually reached out to several folks because I could clearly see they needed the help, but they were not pain aware. So
Yeah.
it was so that's the way it is. So they
Yeah.
have to really, really, really feel the pinch
Yeah.
till they realize that, okay, you know what, let's go ahead and get something going about it.
For sure. One more thing before we go to the questions and lightning round is so Airbnb, Brian Chesky, like he believes so strongly in program managers. Like he has a because he's so involved, like he's all the way down, in the weeds. Like he's still like a decision maker. And I know he said he tried it the other way before. Like I listened to a lot of him say, like he tried the other way where it's like, oh, just delegate. But now like his entire company is on one roadmap, right? So they have one roadmap, everybody's contributing to the roadmap. And basically the way he drives everything is like with program managers. So he has like a team of program managers that I believe report to him, if I'm not mistaken. But then I think for product, they focus, and I might be getting this wrong, but it's really focused on product marketing, right? Because a lot of times what people do is that they're using product managers as project managers. Right? That's what a lot of companies.
Yeah.
He really delineates that. Like program manager, they're execution, right? So
Yeah.
and product managers, they're doing product marketing, like speaking to the customers. Or program managers, you execute. So, but when you are now mixing both, I think it's difficult for you to. I think it's difficult for you to really delve deep into the customer pain, understand what they're really looking for, and all of that, and now come back in house and now still drive it from start to finish with engineering, with implementation, and go to market and all of that, right? I think
Right.
you sort of need to delineate that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
Absolutely.
yeah, that's my thought. All right, so let's go to some of the. Maybe we can do questions and then can do the lightning round and then end from there. All right, so I'm just gonna look for the questions. Just bear with me. My screen, the text is a bit small. Well, okay, so Julia Rajic says, what recommendations do you have for getting to the root cause? Often when I dig around to locate challenges, it's just a series of complaints.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so there are two things around this. Number one is, you've got to pair the right questions with the right people, right? So there are things, you're looking at things at a strategic and a tactical level, but then you're also thinking about things that are relevant to them. So, for me, there are around 11 disciplines for project management: schedule management, budget management, deliverables management, risks and issues, scope management, um, knowledge management. Then you have resources, which is internal, external IT, as well as vendor management, and then you have reporting and metrics and stakeholder management. So around these disciplines, which of those disciplines match to the work that this person who you're interviewing doing, right? And you've got to pair those up accordingly, and then you've got to ask the questions at the tactical and strategic level. So that's number one: pairing the right questions with the right people. The number two thing is that when you are looking at getting down into the root causes, just I generally use the 5 why principle by Toyota. We have a series of complaints. Okay, let's pause them in the track. Okay, you talk about this. Why do you think this happens? And why do you think this happens, etc., etc. And that ultimately gets you down to really either them sort of thinking a bit deeper and giving you hypothesis, which is fine because you want to work with that, versus just keeping it at a surface level. So that's the magic I would say trick, if you will, for that. The other thing that I would do is on the flip side, where people are not saying anything, right? And so for that, I do is, if I'm not getting anything out of it, people are like just responding in yeses and nos versus a conversation. I tell them, well, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and give you one wish, one challenge that you would want to go, get rid of. What is it and why? And that sort of starts opening them up and getting into more detailed conversations.
Yeah. No, for sure. That's a good one. You also need to pay attention to what's not being said, to the silence.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So this is a question from Blake. He would love to hear about your thoughts on the PMO CP and what PMI is starting to do with this certification. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question, and I'm glad that was asked. Right now, the thing with the PMO CP is that I'm glad that it's in place, because it does recognize the PMI's effort to taking PMO seriously. So until this point in time, before the PMO CP got in, there were different certifications around, and I think there's different certifications out there as well. But there are only a few bodies, globally recognized bodies around project management, or federations around project management that are there. PMI being, one of them, and so it seemed that in the absence of a certification, because with PMI, you had all different types of certifications. You had certifications around project management, around program management, around portfolio management, and things around different types of project management, such as construction management. I think even BAs, if I'm not mistaken. But PMO was clearly lacking. And so, with this certification in place, it's definitely a step in the right direction, in my opinion, of taking PMOs seriously and signaling to others all organizations around the world that they should be taking PMOs seriously too as well. So I think that that is a strong positive that has really come out of this.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Just scanning, looking for questions. This is from Dharmesh. As a project manager, do we have to know everything about the project in detail? What are your thoughts here, Hussein?
That's a very interesting question. To me, I think you need to be, you need to know enough about the project to know when you're being lied to, right? So you can. I know that's a very subjective response, but I think you've got to. That's what you've got to do because this is a team sport, okay, and you can only do so much, and there are roles and responsibilities of the people that you have on your team. Your core information, your core role is to make sure that you're shepherding the cats and rallying the team towards the direction to drive the outcomes of the project, right? That doesn't mean that you need to know everything about everything, but it does need to know whether somebody's either not but you don't need to know enough to know whether somebody's not pulling their weight, whether they're lack response or lack thereof are genuine, or anything that they're doing or not doing is jeopardizing the project or not. And so I think that is the extent that you have to go to.
Makes sense. All right, and I think the rest are comments. Carrie from thank you for chiming in. Obi, thank you for chiming in. I see one question. I think there's a question from Karanjit. What do you suggest we can do to get ourselves marketed to be a program manager? Yeah, so basically, I guess you're asking the question, how can you take a step up? Yeah. So I think this ties back to what you mentioned, Hussein, as far as really doing the work where you are right now before yeah. So that would make a case, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I know we have a few more minutes. I want to do a lightning round with Hussein. So Hussein, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. All right. Okay. So what's one app you can't live without?
LinkedIn. Gotta have LinkedIn. Best place to connect with everyone, the community, and
Right.
share your thoughts.
I was gonna say that's cheating. That's all right. But anyway, I'll take that. By the
Yeah.
way, this is a good opportunity to network. So please feel free to drop your LinkedIn profiles and just network with each other in the chat, right? Because as PMs, I know one of the things, a lot of times we are usually by ourselves in the wild, and we don't always get a chance to meet each other. So this is a nice opportunity to do that. So feel free to just connect with each other. All right. What's one productivity hack you swear by, Hussein?
I would say time blocking and theming those time blocks. I think context switching can become a real problem. So having that can be a good productivity boost.
Nice. Biggest pet peeve in meetings?
I would say is when I get a meeting invite and it has no agenda in it.
What if I say quick chat in the agenda?
Quick chat, yeah.
All right. What's a book every PM should read?
I think it's The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. It's one little page every day, and when you're in the world of PM, oftentimes or not, you're generally stressed. This sort of helps you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, and even provide some insights and motivation along the way. So I think one page a day before you start your day would be amazing.
One page a day keeps the doctor away.
Yeah.
1 PM content creator you admire?
Well, this is a person who I've been following. Apparently he's made it to #1 at Fevicon. Mukhtar. He's a content creator that I admire. One thing that I actually admire about what you do is, most, if not all, of your posts are texts, right? And people are using different things like images, like carousels. I love using carousels myself. Even videos, etc., to boost engagement, etc. But just text based is killing it for you, and I really admire that.
That doesn't count. By the way, that was not like I didn't tell
I
Hussein to
know,
do
I
that.
know, but I know it wasn't a shameless plug, but
Yeah,
I
no,
needed to, I needed to give the shout out where it was deserved. So.
yeah. If you could see me blushing, I'll be blushing. But yeah, luckily you can't see that. All right. So Hussein, this was a really fantastic conversation. I enjoyed myself. And I'm sure others did. I can see the comments. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Absolutely. So they can, get connected with me on LinkedIn. My DMs are always open, or you can feel free to reach me at my email, which is Hussain Hussain at Barwaz BARWAAZCC.com.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe we can leave that in the comments of the post. All
Yeah,
right. All right. Thank you, everyone. This was great. And yeah, stay in touch. All right. Bye,
absolutely.
y'all.
Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you again, Mukhtar, for
Yeah, for
having me
sure.
here.
Bye.
Bye bye.